Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Dirt Trail Running Podcast. I am Coach Loretta, and I'm here with Coach Reese today. How are you doing today, Reese? Coming off a big weekend of racing at Tunnel Hill?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I'm feeling like my body's feeling pretty recovered. The mentality is still like I still have a little chip on my shoulder for, like what happened with illness in the couple weeks leading up to the race. But, you kind of get through it, and now I've, gotten back out to getting outside, riding my bike and hitting some trails and doing some easy runs and feeling good. So how about you?
Excellent. Oh, I'm doing great. I kind of went to that event, and there were just so many great things that happened that day, so many amazing performances and perfect weather. So I think today's kind of a great time to kind of delve into the topic because, I watched a lot of people not finish the race that they were dreaming of at Tunnel Hill, right? So knowing that, kind of our subject today is like, that's ultra, right? Stop beating yourself over that DNF. And we're going to dive into that a little bit because there's a lot of different reasons people may DNF or what causes people to DNF. And then what do we do after that DNF? Do we keep that rage inside of us, and do we let it eat us up, or do we use all that fitness that we have to build for the next event, right?
Yep, that's absolutely correct. And, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't start the episode giving some congratulations to all the incredible performances that happened on the day. I think, first and foremost, Charlie Lawrence setting the 50-mile world record at 4:48:21. That's an average of like a 5:45 pace for 50 miles. That is
Yeah.
absolutely nuts. And for him to have his little, like, side point, like at the end image that's going to be famous for this world record. For him to have the wherewithal to give a cool little pose at the end, I think was awesome. So it goes
Yeah.
to show,
Did you get to see him at all on the course?
I got to see him on the course, yeah, because he was coming back. So I saw him twice on the out and back during my 50-mile run. And I also saw him actually get to finish like at the finishing line.
Okay, nice.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, it was really fun to watch him all day because he was just flying and it looked effortless like all day. And when you first go around the loop of the campground, I don't know, maybe 600 meters around the loop, I'm not really sure. He came out like 100 meters ahead of everybody. I'm like, who is this guy? Like, what is he doing? And man, he held that pace the entire day. It was really incredible to be part of that event and beating Jim Walmsley's 2019 record for that. So
Yeah, and I think, like we should say too that wasn't his 2019 record like a part of like the Hoka Carbon X? Like that was a road event and he was wearing carbon shoes. Now I don't know what Charlie was wearing, but like that course, if you do the 50 miles, like you got about like I don't know what, like 800 feet of elevation gain or so with the tunnel and everything. So it wasn't it was a flat course by all means, but it wasn't perfectly flat. It wasn't like
right.
you know. Um, yeah, it was absolutely incredible. Wally Hasseltine, he set the 80 to 84-year-old world record and
Woo.
out there. He's 80 years old, 26 hours, 22 minutes, and 26 seconds for a 100-mile. Now, if that's not inspirational, I don't know what is.
I know, right? I want to be running hundreds at 80.
That's what I'm saying.
That's a secret.
I could have another like 65 years of performance ahead of me. That's awesome. So for everybody out there, it's about the long-term build. It's not about the short term, right? Like we want to be in this sport for life because it's, as we all know, the greatest sport on earth. Greatest
Right.
life. Allison Mercer got the women's masters American record for the 50 mile. Get this, everybody. She ran 5 hours and 57 minutes and 12 seconds for 50 miles. That is absolutely amazing. So, and again, she's the masters record, so she's got to be at least what, over 40 years old or so. Is
Right,
that
right, absolutely.
Elov Olsen in the 100 mile? He got a course record. He got the Swedish national record, beating it by I think over an hour. I think the old Swedish record was like 12:32 or something like that. He came in at 11:26:19 for the 100 miler. That's averaging a pace of about I think it's about like a 6:48, 6:50 pace for 100 miles. Absolutely mind-boggling. I got to run with him. We ran probably the first like 16 miles together, and then he just took off. So he only sped up throughout the day, and it was amazing to see. It was great to talk with him. Funny little tidbit too. He actually him and another guy running at the front. I think he was in the 50 mile. They were talking me through how to pee while running, so I learned a little trick, a little tip on the trails during a race. So I'm going to be implementing that during my winter training. Um, eliminate those 8 station stop times, if you know what I'm saying.
Oh, that's great. And he also had a fun finish where he sort of skipped across the finish line.
Yeah, it was amazing. He just kind of like leapt up, like put his arms out like a, like a big eagle, and he was like, "Wee."
Yeah, he could still jump at mile 100.
Yeah, jumped right into like one of his crewmates' arms. So if anybody's seen that photo or that video on Instagram, it's it's pretty cool. So and just to round out the field too, I have the 100 place times here. We have. Oh, let me see if I can pull it up here. Okay, so we'll start with the 50-mile times. We have Charlie Lawrence. We mentioned his time, 4:48:21. Raj Paul Panu, he came in at 5:02:01. Just some gnarly fast times. Like that is like 14 minutes, less than 15 minutes behind each other. That's neck and neck for a 50-mile race. And then we have Johan Lantz. He was a part of Olav Olsen's crew. He came in at 5:14:41. And now before the race, at the pre-race dinner the night before, we were all talking, and I asked him, I was like, yeah, so what are you shooting for in the 50-mile? He goes, sub 5:15. So if that's not knowing your body and knowing your pacing strategy, I don't know what it is. He came in 19 seconds below what he wanted. So, I mean, he got in there and he got top 3. Dropped from the 100-mile down to the 50. He still got like 4th place in a time of 5:46:42 for 50 miles. So I believe he dropped at like mile 90. So I mean, he hit 5:46 for the 50 and continued on for most of the rest of the race. So that is amazing. I just wanted to shout that out because I can't believe how fast his 50-mile split was, given that he ran 90 miles.
Right.
So congratulations to everybody else that finished the 50-miler. It's definitely a major accomplishment. There's a lot of finishers in the 50 that drop down from the 100. So even though it's not the time or the distance that you were thinking, that's the nice thing about this arena is that it allows you to push really hard for 100 miles. And if it's not your day, then you can at least still have a 50-mile finish and not a DNF on record. So for the 100-milers, we have Olav Olsen. We mentioned his time, 11:26:19. That is a new course record that bests Zach Bitter's 2018 course record by, man, I want to say 35, about like 44 minutes or so, 43, 42 minutes.
Maybe 34.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Zach Bitter's previous was a 12:08. And then we have Phil Young coming in behind him. He PR'd with a time of 12:27. Phil has been at this race for years, and I think that he has been perfecting his build up for this race. He's only been getting better and better every year. We have Michael Q from Madison, Wisconsin. Go Wisconsinites, coming in at 12:50:38. That is a pretty blazing fast time. And then we'll just go to number 4 since I went to number 4 on the 100-milers. We have JJ Shield from Arlington Heights. Came in at 14:07. So congratulations to everybody else that stuck out the 100-mile distance. Again, with that, dropping down option, it's pretty enticing to call your day fairly early. So everybody that finished the 100-miler definitely went back and forth across the start finish line, right next to their cars a number of times, and still had the mental fortitude to keep pushing. So congratulations to all you out there.
And let's hear it for the women. What were the women's top 3?
The women's,
okay. It's also a course record in the 50-mile by the top female.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So I want to say Micah Morgan. She came in 6th overall. 15:14:14. That is an amazingly fast time. Second place female is April Wu from Louisville, Kentucky, 45 years old, 15:45:54. So that was a 100-mile neck and neck race right there. 10 minutes.
Was.
Holy smokes. And the only reason I'm mentioning their ages is because I think it is incredibly inspirational to see such fast 100-milers from those who, are technically in the masters category, right?
Right, absolutely.
Ultra runners, we can continue to get better for years. So if you didn't have the race that you wanted this year, or at this race, or in the past couple years, maybe you're having a rough, 5-year, cycle of ultra running, like, don't worry about it. We've got this, we got a long time. Yeah, and there's Oh my gosh, there's some 50-year-olds I'm seeing here in the top 20. That's just amazing. Okay, so number 3 female, we have Amelia Driscoll. She 45 again, 18:03, blazing fast time, and we'll go to number 4 for the females as well. We have Lindsay Roberts from Carbondale, so she's pretty much a local to the race. 18:43.55. Congratulations to all of you 100-mile female winners. We'll go back to the 50. Sorry, we're jumping around here, but thanks for reminding me that women are just as important as anybody else, if not more so. Let's see. First place female is going to be Paulina Odnet in the 50 mile. I'm definitely not saying that right, but blazing fast, 50-mile time, 5:54.14, incredible.
Course record.
Course record. Coming in right behind her, Allison Mercer, 40 years old, 5:57.12. Just like a 3-minute difference in a 50-mile race is that like inspirational?
Right.
Just an amazing performance from both of them. And then we have Audrey Lawrence from Seattle, Washington, 34 years old. She came in at 6:19.30. Just an incredible time. So, and for anybody out there, to put that into context, like a 6:19.30 is going to be an average of about like a 7.5-minute per mile average pace. So congratulations to all you ladies out there. And number 4, we have Devin Yanko. She dropped down from the 100-miler, still got 4th place finish in the 50-mile, coming in at 6:37.26. I actually got to chat with her a little bit after the race. We swapped some war stories. Turns out it just wasn't her day either. And that's the competitive field right there, is if you're not on point and, you're not up to the rest of the 50 miles, sometimes it's better to drop down and preserve your body, preserve, not having any injuries, preserve your lungs and your heart, and, train hard and learn some mistakes and get healthy and come back for the next. So congratulations to everybody out there that finished and that dropped down, even though it wasn't your day. There's going to be other races and fights in the future.
For sure. So it's really exciting. You can, as you guys listeners can tell, that Reese and I are super stoked about this race. There was just so many great things happening, and it's awesome to watch people that have such great successes. I do want to shout out our coach Scott. He finished his 5th year at Tunnel Hill, so he got a 500-mile buckle, which is amazing to have that kind of perseverance to go back 5 times to the same course and finish a full 100. Just that to me is really impressive, because sometimes the unknown is a little easier to get through than the known, and he definitely knew that course like probably the back of his hand. So really a big shout out, and he's also helped a lot of people get through that course on his way to his 100 miles, through the years. So shout out to Coach Scott Struck. So now that we're talking about it, like we had some really great successes, right? But then we had some people, and you even mentioned some people that were planning 100 dropped to the 50. And in this race, it just happens that when you drop to the 50, you still get a buckle and you still get a finish. A lot of races aren't like that, right? So if you don't run the full distance, it's considered a DNF, and it's on your permanent ultra sign up record, and it plagues us for as long as you let it plague you, right? So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I guess we can use my race as an example. I think just the long and the short of my race is that it became apparent to me about like a marathon in that like my body was still really recovering from COVID. By the 32-mile mark, I was having a lot of trouble and tightness in my chest. And then by 38 miles, I was trying to breathe so hard, feeling like I was at altitude, that my chest started to get a little pain, started to get a little pinch in my chest. So by mile like 38, 40, like I knew that even like 50 miles was going to be a stretch. So I was taking a lot of walk breaks, ended up dropping down to the 50, just spent a couple hours feeling like my body was not the way that it typically feels when I'm pushing hard. And of course there were mistakes made on the day. Like, I went out pretty hot. I went out pretty fast. I probably could have had an extra gel or maybe a little bit more hydration. But really, I wasn't thirsty. I wasn't too hungry. Like my stomach was okay. I just couldn't catch my breath out there. And being 3.5 weeks post-COVID, it kind of freaked me out. And my mentality just went completely south, thinking that like, hey, this could still be COVID in my chest affecting me. And I didn't want to be that guy that, just slogs out another 50. putting more wear and tear on my body and my joints, potentially pulling something or tearing something like I did the last time I got COVID and tried to race. So I decided, you know what, like it's a bummer. It hurts the pride, it hurts the ego. But you know, dropping down to 50 with still like a halfway decent 50-mile time was better than, you know, spending a couple months injured or in an ambulance getting carted off of the trail. So had I have not had COVID, would I have gone out too hard? Would I have, you know, performed better? There's no way to tell, right? I felt like I was going really good, really easy. It was fun to woohoo and high five everybody out there and see everybody and cheer everybody on. I want to, you know, I always try to be the loudest person on course just because I want to stoke other people up as much as other people stoke me up. Spend some time on those bridges, doing a little running and like balance beaming like I typically do. To the point where Eli Olson even looked at me and was like, "Oh, let's see you do that on lap 2," you know. And I was gonna try, man, because sometimes I just gotta have fun if it's gonna be such a long day, you know what I mean? And I love doing that stuff. So I felt within myself, but like the lungs weren't there. The mentality thinking that like, hey, it could be still COVID that I'm recovering from it. That mentality just completely pulled me from my race. And you know, like with ultras, you got to be in it, like in your mind and in your body. And by 50 miles, I didn't have as much faith in my body at that point, and decided to call. So with that being said, that was my race. I posted on Instagram about it if anybody wants to read a little bit more. I had a great time thanks to the race organization. I'm even wearing one of their hats from Durban Race Management. And you know, like how am I dealing with it? Like I've had a couple days now to think about like what that performance means, and it's kind of this weird feeling where it feels almost like a consolation to say that like I dropped down to the 50, you know, to avoid like a DNF. My 50-mile time again isn't like a 50-mile time that I feel like I, you know, I was a proper performance for myself. But I also probably took out the 100-miler a little bit too hard. So can I call it like a legit, you know, 50-mile split at 100, you know, if I was racing for another flat 100-miler? Probably not. So my mentality right now is, you know, like nothing is ever like a failure. Nothing is ever not worth it unless you learn something, you know? And I think what I learned is that, you know, you got to have respect for your body. You got to have respect for what it feels like to push hard. You know, and COVID definitely, having it 3.5 weeks ago, it took me out of a couple key races that, you know, like I could have used to help me pace my 100-miler, took me out of some good training. So even coming back out of that experience, I learned that like, you know, like even though I, you know, after like a week of having it, I could get up and I could run, I probably should have taken it just a little bit slower too. You know, I was dealing with some ankle tendonitis things that never ever plague me unless I get COVID, like after last year. So, you know, like those were the lessons that I took into it. Another lesson is to just, you know, be able to swallow the pride, swallow the ego, and own up to all of my stated goals and just say like, hey, like it wasn't my race. It wasn't, you know, and that's fine. I'm healthy. I'm back up. I'm running and I'm enjoying outdoors like I typically do. And that's the big thing for me is if I can't get outside and enjoy myself, because that's why I do this stuff. Like I want to be biking outside. I want to be running outside. I want to be enduring outside. You know, so if it would have been just a finish at all costs, the 100, hike the rest, and, you know, like, you know, death before DNF mentality, I might be injured right now. I might not have been able to get outside this morning and live the lifestyle that I like to live, you know? So, those are my key takeaways from that. And really, I'm kind of just chalking it up to a nice long run, a good supported long run. I got to cheer on my girlfriend who finished her first 50-mile race. I got to cheer on some other people. And most importantly, I got to spend some time with, you know, with athletes out there, with a couple athletes that I coach. You know, one of them crewed me. The other one I stayed in an Airbnb with and cooked breakfast for the morning after. So it's just a good communal experience. So although the race didn't quite go the way that I wanted to or hoped or planned, like that's ultra racing, you know, like you're going to have DNFs, you're going to have drop downs. If you're trying to push your envelope, you're not always going to, you know, come right to the line. Sometimes you're going to overstep the line, overshoot it. And I mean, I feel like for anybody that's trying to get like the top performance out of themselves, like you kind of have to be okay with like, you know, show up or blow up. So, and that's what happened. So it was a great weekend, chalking it up to a good long run and just trying to keep the mentality. nice and easy going, and have some grace on myself and just say, hey, the last 6 months of training aren't not worth it because this race didn't work out. Who knows? Maybe next year is when I'm gonna, materialize all the miles that I put in the last half of this year. So
Well, thanks for your transparency there, but a whole lot to unpack from there, right? So, there's some things that you mentioned, and I'm just going to kind of, peel this apart a little bit, because I think these are things that people have to remember when they come away from an ultra race that they did not finish. A big DNF. Okay, so what does that mean, and what can I take from this experience as I move forward? And you already started that reflection process, which is, I think, is a big piece, is letting yourself reflect and process and think about, like, what were those key takeaways that I learned that I can use next time, instead of dwelling on the fact that I did not finish. Dwell on the fact that you just learned a whole bunch of stuff wrapped all up in one big day, right? So first of all, you mentioned a little bit about fueling. I think that's something that every single race we can learn a little bit more about ourselves, and how much we need, and whether we need something different or more or less. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because you did mention, oh, maybe I could have had another gel. I mean, that is a piece to think about when you go on to your next race.
yeah, for anybody that knows me, they've probably heard me say, like, like when you're in an ultra marathon, like, bad mood, eat food, like there's points in any race where, like, when you're pushing up to your limits, like there's points even in like kettle this past year where I was like, like, oh man, like, why am I out here? Like, this is so hard. Like, like the rocks hurt, the roots hurt, like, like, this sucks, like ultra running's hard. And then I think, oh, I'm in a bad mood. Like, I should try to eat a little bit more. Maybe I'm down on my calories. And like right away, if I take a gel, or like I slam some fruit snacks, or like take some drink mix, like give it 10 minutes, and I'm like, I love this. I love being outside. This is why I do this. Like my core, I know that I love just like ambulating outside so much that, like if I'm ever like, this is stupid, why am I out here? Like, I might just be low on calories. So when I was in the middle of the race, it was, like 26 miles or so before I got to see my crew for the first time. And I thought, oh, maybe I'm just not eating as much as like I should be. I was taking in around like 300 calories an hour. At that point, I had spent 3 hours out on course. I think I probably had like, 5 or 6 spring energies. One of them was one of those like 200-calorie ones, the awesome sauces, which are super good. OMR sells them on the website. Buy them from Michelle. Like, they're great if you want like a whole foods source of calories. But like I had that, and I had just about 2 bottles worth of mix that I mixed the morning of, which had 100 calories in each bottle. So I was like, yeah, I'm at about like 800 calories or so. So that's about what like I wanted to be. So, I kept going, and, like by the time the breathing got heavy and I started kind of getting down on myself, like, oh my gosh, I'm breathing so hard for what I typically run, or I'm breathing harder than I typically do for this pace. Maybe I should just slam a gel. So I slammed another gel, tried to troubleshoot a little bit, was like sucking down more calories. I knew on, that last out and back, like I'd be seeing my crew like fairly soon, because it's only like, the northern out and back is like you hit your crew, you go out 2 miles, you come back 2 miles, and you hit your crew again. So I was like, man, I'll just try to slam a bunch of water, feel good. I didn't have any sloshing in my stomach, but I was troubleshooting all day and just thinking like, hey, is this heavy chested feeling like, because of my nutrition? Is it because I need to slow down? Do I need to walk? So I took some extra walk breaks. And like, every time I kept like going after slamming the gel, slamming the nutrition, I'd pick back up into a run, and all of a sudden, like, I'd be moving at what is a typical like slower pace for me, and like I was breathing so freaking hard, and like my heart rate wasn't really spiking all that much. So I was like, this is interesting. Like I just don't feel like I'm getting air in. And then those chest pains started, and that's when I was like, ooh, yikes, like no go. So I think for a lot of people, like, like to prevent your DNF or try to troubleshoot your DNF, like if you're having like, like bad mentality or bad feelings, or you're getting down on yourself, try to think back on like, hey, how much have I been eating? Can I eat a little bit more? How's my stomach? Do I have any sloshing? Have I been taking in some sodium? Things like that. Cause like, I mean, we should be trying to troubleshoot our races before we just cut the cord.
Right. Absolutely. And then, during the race, when we're talking about a DNF, the troubleshooting apparently didn't work, right? So that we made that choice of DNF. So now after the race, now we can think about it, reflect, go back and think about what maybe you would have done different in some of those key things like fueling. The next thing you mentioned was pacing. And you mentioned a couple things, you know, pacing and also pushing the envelope, right? And so when we're thinking about you, you are one of our elite coaches, more towards the front of the pack. And, you know, there's that risk and reward when we go out and we are going for an all-time performance. But then there's also people that are going for finishing under 30 hours, and they can also make that same mistake of pushing the pace too early. You know, so it doesn't really matter who you are out there, you know, and what your time goal is. You know, when we're going for 100, it's often much slower than our daily training pace. And so then when we go out there and we're feeling fresh from a taper, we may make that same mistake early on. So I think, you know, now reflecting on what happened with you, you know, thinking about this, would you approach the pace a little different in the beginning if you had to do it all over again? Or if you were healthy and, you know, doing it, would it have been the same sort of method for you?
It probably would have been a similar method. I mean, if I would have done it smarter, like I would have cooled down on the pace. I mean, I still probably would have been closer towards the front. That's just typically where I like to take my races out. But like, you know, instead of doing like, you know, 6:45 pace for the first like, you know, 7 or 8 miles, like I probably would have like done more like 7:45 and then just tried to build into the day. But for anybody, and I kind of want to back this up a little bit, for anybody that's been following me on Strava, like y'all know that like there's been a couple workouts where I'm like, I get a solid D for this workout. And you know, like you look at it, like a couple of my runs, it's like, you know, like a sub 3 hour marathon or something like that. And it's like, but at the same time, like the purpose of that particular marathon was to practice my 100-mile pace. And there were times when I knew that I should have been going slower, but I didn't because it just felt good. It just felt good to run. And in one of my Strava titles or Strava descriptions, I even said like athletes, like that's the hardest thing about 100-mile training, especially when it's flat, is that like it's going to be way easier, like way easier than what you can run your marathon in. And it's so hard training at that because, you know, like if you go out for 25 miles at like what would be your like best 100-mile performance, you're still going to be moving really, really easily, you know? So
Right. Yeah.
easy be easier. And I think that's where the saying goes, like you can never start your ultras too easy. So, you know, and just going back to the whole COVID thing, like I was kind of going in blind with where my upper end performance would have been just because I wanted to like either succeed or make that mistake in a 50-mile race the month beforehand, you know, see what my 50, give a hard 50, and then let that kind of translate into like, hey, like about what range should I be at for my 100-mile run. So I think like the lesson behind that is that like, I mean, like it sucks that I was taken out of the 50-mile race, you know, but at the same time, if other athletes out there can build in these longer efforts, these longer training runs to really simulate what's going to happen to your body come the end stages of an ultra after you hit 50 miles, that's going to be huge. And a lot of those races too can inform how a race is actually going to feel. Like, you know, for other athletes looking to do other OMR races coming up next year, say like Earth Day or say, well, Frozen Gnome's the next one coming up, Galena, or even let's take Kettle as an example, because I think that's kind of like a flagship race for a lot of people in the Midwest here. Even though you might not be able to get on course all the time and do a ton of course recon and whatnot, you can still find that like, hey, there's about like 8 to 10,000 feet of elevation gain, depending on where you look. In a 100-mile race, you know, it's about like 80 to 100 foot of elevation gain per mile. You can take a look at the elevation profile and see like what kind of punchy climbs there are going to be. And then you can go out on some of your local trails and you can simulate some of that too, you know? So, yeah, I think getting that course specificity and really trying to mimic and get those longer runs in for a lot of people, it would be a good thing.
Yeah, and so that can help you a little bit gauge an idea of where your pace should be and where you know you should start that race out. So something to reflect on. And then I think also you know, your sickness. I mean, I think that's a huge thing when we're thinking about, do I keep pushing through because I said I was going to finish this race, or Or do I have an illness or an injury, something that is not smart if I can continue on, right? You know, I have my recent experience at 6 Days in the Dome where, you know, I've been working on physical therapy all year. We thought that I was going to be good to go. And I had to drop around 100K because I got to the point that I couldn't step on my foot, right? So I made the decision to call it. I have no regrets because it was between, you know, really injuring myself and stopping that day or pushing forward. Could I have continued and went on for the next, 30 some miles? I probably could have. I could have done it and I could have drug myself to the finish. But at what point is that really setting me back for my next event, right? Because we want to do more events than just one normally in the year. And, you know, if we can be rational about our decision of whether we're going to finish or not finish so that we're not leaving ourselves so injured or so sick coming out of that event, you're going to recover a lot faster. Then you can start moving forward to your next opportunity. So I think like taking DNFs, learning from them, you know, making a good decision when you're deciding whether you're going to, you know, stop or not. I think that's important. But I just again don't think we should beat ourselves up over these DNFs because there are so many things that happen in ultra that cause our DNFs, whether it's pacing, whether it's fueling. Somebody was mentioning to me that they were running one of the events and their aid station stops they realized were really long. Well, you know what? You might not have gotten what you wanted out of that race. You realized your aid station was really long. Okay, so next time I'm going to adjust that, right? So even if you have events that put you at too long of an aid station that causes a DNF because you can't finish under cutoff, then you go back to the drawing board, right, for the next event and go, okay, I need to really focus. I mean, maybe my fueling went well today and my pacing went well, but I was too long at aid stations and I sucked up a bunch of time and it caused me not to be able to get under cutoff. So then I can go through to the next race, right, and plan ahead and go, okay, I got these other things kind of dialed in, but I'm going to really nail in on shortening my aid station.
Yep, that's right, Loretta. And I think, you know, like calling back to our goals at the start of the podcast, like I want to be 80 years old and I want to be like running ultras and I want to be in it and I want to be enjoying the outdoors. And I think the whole death before DNF mentality is a good way to fast track yourself into burning out and not staying in the sport for how long you want to stay in. And, you know, it comes down to like, me personally, I have a little bit of experience with ultra endurance races and knowing what my body feels like at a particular effort and when I'm dialed and when I'm going and when it's okay to keep moving. That's more than just, oh, my knees are kind of sore because it's a long distance, you know, or like, oh, my feet kind of hurt because it's a long distance. It's, you know, like what I felt didn't feel like myself. And for other people that don't have that experience, like you kind of just got to keep checking in with yourself. Like, hey, like, am I healthy? Am I feeling good? Can I continue on? Like, am I injured? Am I risking injury? And, you know, like for the front of the pack, I know there's some conjecture about people, like elites just coming to competitions and just quitting when the going gets tough and they're not winning because, you know, they want to save themselves for another race. And I think that when we think about the front end of the field for people that are like earning a living in this sport, it's much more important to save yourself for the races that you're on point for, because that's your livelihood. You know, that's
Right.
and you know when people are pushing their bodies so hard, you know, like a lot of elites can mentally will their bodies to go all the way to the breaking point. And I feel like that's a very awesome thing because it creates very fast times, but it's a dangerous thing because it can really take a toll on your health and longevity. So I don't necessarily have too much problem with elites dropping down to other distances or dropping out completely. It's tough when that spot, you know, could have been given to somebody else who was going to finish the race. But you know, the point of Tunnel Hill is, and Steve Durbin has said it in another podcast, he wants to make this race as fast as possible because he wants to see world records go down. He wants to see American and age records go down. And in order to be at that pointy end of the, you know, like what is possible for an 80-year-old, what is possible for a Masters female or for a world record, you're going to be going for broke. You're going to be pushing up against that line as hard as you can for as long as you can. And sometimes it's just not your day, you
Right.
know.
Right.
To the same degree, you know, like what we talked about before, like problem solving and troubleshooting your race for a lot of us that want to finish and want to be a part of the 100-miler finisher club, want to be part of the 50-miler finisher club. You know, like there's a lot of things that we can do during our race to help. And given that Tunnel Hill has some pretty generous cutoff times, like it makes a great race for people who are looking to do their first 50, their first 100 and whatnot. Just because you can, if things are getting rough out there and like you've been out there forever, you could really use like a 2-hour nap, you know, like your head spinning. You can take that 2-hour nap and you can get up and you can keep going, you know. So it makes it a great environment for everybody to not only try as hard as you can and maybe blow up on the way, but try as hard as you can and get that finish. And I think that's what it's all about is, you know, like making sure that everybody can get the race that they want.
Right, right. And I think, you know, you should, you know, have gratitude for yourself for having the courage to be able to step up to the line of 100 or a 50-mile race and give it your best effort on that day, and whatever comes of that day, right? You're just giving your 100% effort. And if it ends up coming to a DNF, that's what happens on that day, right? If this sport were easy, everyone would be doing it. You know, how many people do you know outside of our small ultra running community that actually runs events that are this big? And sometimes I think we forget that. We lose perspective once we're in the sport, thinking everybody's finishing hundreds, everybody's finishing 50 milers, when in essence, it's really not happening. It really has taught me a lot. The more I go and crew and pace people, the more I see that. I see people that are, you know, very talented runners, elites, pros. I see them struggling just the same as someone who's struggling to finish under cutoff. You know, you see that it's not easy for anyone, even the elites or the pros, you know, to go out there and have a good day. I feel like, you know, the odds of having everything come together perfectly on race day are really slim. You can put in all the work, you can be prepared, you can think you have a great race day plan, and something can fall apart. And it's just kind of out of our control at that point, right? But, you know, being kind to yourself and going, hey, I worked hard for this. I put hours and hours of time into this. It's not wasted. I might not have gotten the finish I want, but I got more fitness. I'm healthier. I'm going to have more longevity in the sport. You know, I have better mental health because I've spent time out, you know, running and improving myself. So, you know, thinking about that, there's just so many positives that come out of a DNF, I think, but we seem to focus on that's bad, I didn't finish, you know? So kind of reframing that, I think is super helpful. And then going back and reflecting on all of the things that you learned from that, because there's always things you can learn from every single race. And what can I do different next time so I can get to that finish line? For me, like going back and thinking like I made these changes because I knew things were kind of not working for me, and I worked through them, knowing that it wasn't I didn't finish because I chose I guess let the mental pressure get over me. It is, you know, if I were able to make changes and make things going and keep going versus I just gave up. I don't think most people that are getting DNFs are just giving up. I think that there's a lot of factors that contribute to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for anybody to, you know, like start on the starting line of any distance ultra marathon, like, you know, whether you finish or not, like pat yourself on the back because you're a part of an elite, like human subspecies that, you know, like gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get your run in, or goes running while your kids are playing soccer, or, you know, like finds nifty ways to like have some you time and work on your fitness for your goals. Whether you finish or not, it doesn't negate all the miles that you put in, like leading up to the race. It doesn't negate all the things that you learn along the way. It doesn't negate all the fun that you would be having, or you would have had in the buildup for it. And I think, you know, like that's what it comes down to is like, you always got to make sure that like your training is fun, because when we race, like we only get like a handful of those opportunities, right? So like if you're not enjoying the process, what's the point? Because like racing consists of like 0.000000001% of our total like enjoyment and experience of being outside and moving in the outdoors, you know?
Right. I love that. And, you know, I mean, when you think about doing a 50 mile or a 100 mile, it's just a teeny tiny droplet of water in the bucket compared to all the training that you put towards that, right? And that doesn't get taken away from you with a DNF. You carry that forward you know, like right now, Reese has this all bottled up in him, all of this stuff that he's been working on over the last 6 months since Kettle. He's only going to be more prepared when he shows up at the next race. So it doesn't go away. It's not taken away from us just because we didn't get that buckle or that finish.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And you know, like you kind of have to like take that, and it's tough ending the year on kind of like a whimper, right? Like kind of like I spent 6 months building up, and like one of my two races at the end of the year, like I didn't get to race because of COVID, and now this one, like I could still feel that like my body doesn't feel totally good, you know, like it's kind of a like flat line to like the end of the year, but you kind of just have to like take that chip on your shoulder and like pack it for another day, and take the recovery that you need to you know like have a good Thanksgiving, have a good holiday season, and then come back, like learn the lessons, try different things in training. I know that like for me personally, whenever I'm out running now, it's like I'm thinking about like what my strengths are and what my weaknesses are. And I've said it since Kettle of last year. It's like, you know, I spent a lot of time building up some good like ultra leg speed. And now like, you know, during this winter, like I'm really going to be focusing on ultra durability. You know, like I want to be able to keep, you know, the same pace that I do the first 20 miles and the last 20 miles. And that's going to alter how I'm going to change my training. So that way, you know, we can go for Kettle in 2024 and, you know, hopefully get another record.
Right. Nice. Well, I think that's sort of a wrap of our DNF show. But it leads me to our next topic. So, you know, I'm just going to kind of put a little toss a little topic out for next week. I think, Reese, we should talk a little bit about transition season and planning for 2024 race season and beyond. What's your thoughts on that? Because that's where a lot of our athletes are right now.
Oh my gosh, I think you just read my mind, especially since I asked two sentences that also lead into next week. Yeah, that sounds great. I would love it. Yeah,
Okay.
let's globally for your entire season. We're not going to focus on any one race or one build up in particular.
Yes.
What does that transition look like in context of your entire 2024 year?
Yeah, I love that. And, you know, I actually have been working with a lot of athletes that are planning 2024, 25, 26. They have a lot of, you know, plans over the next 3 years that they're building to like a major goal of theirs. So it'll be fun to talk about that a little bit next week. So thanks everyone for listening. It was a great show. If you'd like to go ahead and like us on Facebook, Ornery Mule Run Coaching, and on Instagram, that would be amazing. And like us on our YouTube channel.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Enjoy the week. Have fun out there. It's unseasonably warm, so enjoy it while it lasts.
Bye.